The stars glittered in the vast, endless sky. It was the year 2489, and humanity had stretched its reach across the cosmos. New worlds were discovered, new alliances made, and technology advanced beyond imagination. Yet there was one planet that remained untouched. HFY, a mysterious and dangerous world that no human had ever dared to land on. Not because they lacked the courage, but because of the strange, cryptic warning that echoed across the stars. Look all you want, human, but touching has a price. Captain Asha Rio stood at the helm of the Ascendant, a sleek exploration vessel. Her dark brown eyes were fixed on the holographic map before her. The planet XRF-9 loomed in front of her, its greenish surface surrounded by swirling clouds of energy. To most people, the warning was enough to keep them away. But not Asha. She wasn't like most people. She had spent years studying the mysteries of the galaxy, always chasing the unknown. Her crew trusted her, and they knew that when Asha made a decision, it was one that would lead them to something incredible. Today that decision was clear. They were going to land on XRF-9, no matter the cost. Asha glanced at her crew, who were preparing for the descent. Ensign Klein, a young but brilliant engineer, sat at one of the consoles, typing away quickly. His nerves were visible, his hands shaking slightly, but his eyes were filled with excitement. Lieutenant Mara, the tactical officer, paced back and forth, constantly glancing at the readouts. She wasn't afraid. She was eager. Then there was Dr. Yasmin, the xenobiologist, who had been practically bouncing with excitement since they entered the system. XRF-9 could be the discovery of a lifetime, a treasure trove of alien life and technology. It was a dream for any scientist. As the ship descended into the atmosphere, a chill ran down Asha's spine. There was something about the planet that felt alive, like it was watching them. But she pushed the feeling aside. She had a mission to complete. Approaching landing zone, Mara reported. All systems are stable. No sign of hostile activity. Good, Asha replied, her voice steady. Let's make history. The Ascendant touched down on the planet's surface with a soft thud, the engines humming as they powered down. The air was thick with mist, and the strange energy that had surrounded the planet seemed to pulse with life. It felt like they had stepped into another world entirely, one that held secrets just waiting to be uncovered. Asha stood up from her seat and made her way to the airlock. Suit up, she commanded. The crew quickly followed her orders, donning their environmental suits. The atmosphere on XRF-9 was not breathable for humans, but their suits were designed for such conditions. The hatch opened, and the crew stepped onto the alien soil. The ground beneath their feet was soft, almost sponge-like, and covered in strange, bioluminescent plants that glowed in the dim light. The air smelled fresh, but there was an odd, tingling sensation, like the very air was alive with energy. We're the first humans to set foot here, Asha said, looking around in awe. Her voice echoed in the silence of the planet. It was a feeling of triumph, but also a sense of caution. There was something about this place that didn't feel entirely safe. Dr. Yasmin's eyes sparkled as she took a sample of the glowing plants. This could be the key to unlocking the new era of biology, she muttered to herself, lost in the possibilities. Klein, on the other hand, was more focused on the ruins in the distance. Ancient stone structures stood tall, partially covered in vines and moss. The architecture was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Intricate carvings covered the walls, depicting strange, humanoid figures that seemed to watch them as they moved forward. Asha motioned for her team to follow her. Stay close, she warned. We don't know what's out there. As they made their way toward the ruins, a deep, low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. A bright light flickered in the distance, and the air seemed to hum with an energy that made their skin crawl. Asha paused, her hand held up to stop the crew. Did you feel that? She asked, her voice tense. I did, Mara replied. It's like the planet is alive. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the air. It wasn't loud, but it was clear, and it sent a chill down their spines. "Look all you want, human," it said, its tone both deep and ethereal. "But touching has a price." The crew froze. The voice seemed to come from all around them, but there was no sign of anyone or anything. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with the words, as if the planet itself was warning them. Asha's heart raced, but she remained calm. "Ignore it," she said, though her voice was more a whisper to herself than to her crew. They had a mission to complete. No alien voice, no matter how strange, would deter her from uncovering the secrets of XRF-9. They pressed on, entering the ancient city. The structures grew taller, more elaborate. Strange markings covered the walls, and the air grew heavier, as if something unseen was watching their every move. Ensign Klein, still gazing at the carvings, reached out to touch one of the glowing stones. The moment his fingers made contact, a brilliant flash of light erupted from the stone, blinding them all. The ground trembled again, but this time it was different. A voice, far louder and more forceful, boomed through the air. "You have touched what was never meant to be touched. The price will be paid." Asha's heart sank. She turned to Klein, whose face was pale, his body trembling. The warning was no longer a cryptic message. It was a promise. The Synax, whoever they were, had just made it clear. Curiosity had its price. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and Asha's heart skipped a beat. The moment Ensign Klein touched the glowing stone, the world around them seemed to shift. The eerie voice, now deeper and more powerful, echoed through the air once again, louder than before. "You have touched what was never meant to be touched. The price will be paid." Asha turned quickly to look at Klein. His face was pale, his body rigid, as if frozen in place. He wasn't moving, his eyes wide and unblinking. The glow from the stone had faded, but the air was thick with a strange energy. The atmosphere around them felt heavier, as if the planet itself was alive and angry. "Ensign," Asha called out, stepping toward him. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder, but it felt cold, too cold. His skin was almost ice-like, and his breathing was shallow. Klein didn't respond. He was staring straight ahead, his eyes lost in a distant, faraway gaze. His hand was still resting on the stone, but there was something different about it now, almost like the stone was pulling him in. Asha felt a surge of panic, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had to think clearly. "Lieutenant Mara, get the med kit. Klein's condition isn't normal." Mara, who had been standing a few steps behind, hurried to Asha's side. "What happened to him, Captain?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. "I'm not sure," Asha replied, her mind racing. "But whatever it was, we need to figure it out before it's too late." Dr. Yasmin, always the curious one, had been examining the stone since the moment Klein had touched it. She stepped closer, her scientific curiosity pushing aside any fear. "This relic, Captain, it's unlike anything I've ever seen," she said. "I think it's more than just a stone. It could be some kind of ancient artifact. Maybe it's linked to whatever the Synax are." Asha nodded slowly, understanding the weight of Yasmin's words. The Synax were an ancient alien race, their civilization lost to time. The only thing that remained were scattered ruins like the ones around them. And now they had just disturbed something deep within the heart of XRF-9. Asha turned her attention back to Klein. "We need to get him to safety. This place feels dangerous." But as they tried to pull Klein away from the stone, something strange happened. The ground shook harder, and a low hum filled the air. The ruins around them seemed to come alive, their walls shifting as if reacting to their movements. A flash of light erupted from the stone, blinding them all for a moment. When the light faded, the air felt colder. And then they saw it. Standing in front of them, just beyond the ruins, was a massive figure. It was humanoid, but much larger than any human could ever be. The figure shimmered, its form made of light and energy, and its eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity. The crew froze. The Synax Guardian had appeared. The Guardian's voice was deep, resonating with a power that made the air vibrate. "You are trespassers," it said, its tone calm but filled with authority. "You have disturbed the ancient balance. The price will be paid." Asha's heart pounded in her chest. This was the Synax, the beings who had lived on this world long before humanity ever existed. The warning had been clear, but it was no longer just a cryptic message. It was real, and it was dangerous. "We didn't mean to disturb anything," Asha said quickly, trying to keep her voice steady. "We're explorers. We didn't know what we were dealing with." The Synax Guardian remained silent for a moment, its glowing eyes studying them all. Then it spoke again, this time with a strange kind of sorrow in its voice. "Your kind is full of curiosity. You do not understand the forces you are meddling with. The price of your curiosity is not easily paid." Asha felt the weight of its words pressing down on her. She had never believed in the superstitions surrounding Xarath-9. But now, standing before this ancient being, she realized just how much they had underestimated the power of the planet. "Please," Asha said, her voice desperate, "help him. Whatever is happening to Klein, we need to save him." The Guardian's eyes flickered, and then it stepped forward, its presence more powerful than anything Asha had ever felt. The ground beneath their feet seemed to ripple as if the planet itself was alive. The Guardian raised a hand, and a burst of energy surrounded Klein. His body jerked violently, and for a moment, Asha thought he might collapse entirely. Then, as quickly as it had started, the energy ceased. Klein fell to his knees, gasping for breath. His eyes were wide, but now there was clarity in them, as if whatever force had gripped him had released its hold. The Guardian spoke again, its voice softer this time. "The price has been paid. The trials have begun." Asha stepped forward, holding out her hand to Klein. He looked up at her, still shaken but able to move again. What happened?" he asked, his voice weak. "I'm not sure," Asha replied, helping him to his feet, "but I don't think we're out of danger yet." The Guardian turned away, slowly dissolving into the mist that surrounded the ruins. "The trials have begun," it repeated, its voice fading into the distance. "Only those who prove worthy will leave this world." The crew stood in stunned silence. The reality of what they had just experienced began to sink in. The Synax had warned them. They had been given a choice: face the trials of the planet, or pay the ultimate price for their curiosity. But as Asha looked around at her crew, she knew one thing for certain. This mission had just become something much bigger than any of them had imagined. And the trials had only just begun. Asha stood still, her mind racing. The Synax Guardian had disappeared into the mist, leaving only the eerie silence of Xarath-9 in its wake. Her heart still pounded in her chest, but there was no time to think about what had just happened. Her crew needed her, and they had a mission to complete. Klein was on his feet now, still shaken but looking better than he had moments before. His breathing had steadied, but his eyes still looked distant, as if he wasn't entirely himself. Asha noticed the way his hand kept twitching toward the stone he had touched earlier. Whatever had happened to him, it hadn't fully released its hold. "What just happened, Captain?" Lieutenant Mara asked, her voice low and cautious. Is he okay?" "I don't know," Asha said, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "But we can't leave now. We need to understand what's going on here, or we might never get out." Dr. Yasmin, who had been silent up until now, looked down at the ground, her eyes narrowing in thought. The Guardian said something about trials. "Do you think it meant that we have to pass tests? But what kind of tests?" Asha nodded, her mind quickly processing the information. "I think that's exactly what it meant. The Synax aren't just protecting their planet. They're testing us. Testing humanity." Klein took a deep breath and stood up straight. His legs were still shaky, but there was determination in his eyes now. "I'm fine, Captain. Let's get to the bottom of this." The ground beneath their feet shifted, almost as if responding to their decision. Asha didn't flinch. She had been expecting this, the feeling that the planet itself was alive. The stone that Klein had touched was no ordinary relic. It was part of something much bigger, something ancient and powerful. Asha motioned for her crew to follow her. "We need to move. The trials won't wait for us to figure them out." They began walking again, deeper into the ruins. The walls of the ancient city stretched high above them, covered in strange markings that seemed to change the longer they stared at them. The symbols were alien, not like anything they had ever seen, and they gave off an odd, almost hypnotic glow. As they moved forward, Asha couldn't shake the feeling that the Synax were watching them, waiting for them to make their next move. The Guardian's words echoed in her mind. The price will be paid. They reached the heart of the city, a massive stone structure with towering columns and intricate carvings. At its center was a circular platform, surrounded by more glowing symbols. Asha stopped in her tracks, sensing that this was where the trials would begin. "Is this it?" Mara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is this where we start?" Asha nodded. "It has to be. Everything leads here." They stepped onto the platform, and as soon as they did, the ground trembled once more. This time, however, it wasn't just a shake. The entire platform lit up with energy, and the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter. The air was thick with tension, and Asha could feel it in her bones. Something was about to happen. Without warning, a figure appeared before them. It wasn't the Guardian this time, but a different presence, an entity made entirely of light and energy, just like the Guardian. But this one was smaller and more intricate in its design. The figure's form shimmered and shifted, never staying the same for long. "You have come," the figure said, its voice like a melody, soothing yet powerful. "But do you truly understand what you are about to face?" Asha's grip tightened on the hilt of her sidearm, though she knew there was no real threat from this being, not in the way they were used to. Still, she held her ground. "We're here to prove that humanity is worthy of the Synax's trust," Asha said firmly. "We want to understand your planet, your people. We don't want to harm anything, but we need to know what's going on here." The figure tilted its head, as if considering her words. "The Synax respect curiosity, but it is not without its dangers. To prove your worth, you must pass the Synax code. The first trial begins now." The platform beneath their feet began to glow brighter, and the symbols on the walls shifted. The room filled with a low hum as the air seemed to pulse with energy. Asha's eyes widened. This was it. The trial had begun. "The Synax code is not simply a test of strength or intelligence," the figure continued. "It is a test of your very spirit. Can you understand what it means to be human? Can you prove that you are worthy of the secrets we guard?" Asha exchanged a glance with her crew. This wasn't going to be easy. She had a sinking feeling that this trial would challenge them in ways they hadn't prepared for. "Are you ready?" the figure asked. Before Asha could respond, the platform beneath their feet began to shift. The symbols on the walls expanded, forming a massive puzzle. It wasn't just a physical puzzle, though. This was a puzzle that would test their minds, their hearts, and their ability to work together. Asha could feel the weight of the challenge pressing down on her shoulders. Klein stepped forward first, his eyes scanning the glowing symbols. "This is no ordinary puzzle. These symbols, they're alive, changing as we watch them." "That's right," Yasmin said, her voice filled with awe. "The puzzle is shifting. It's like it's testing us to see if we're capable of solving it." Asha stepped up to the puzzle, her eyes narrowing as she studied the symbols. She knew this wasn't just about finding the right answer. It was about understanding something deeper, something about humanity itself. They would have to work together, think beyond their training, and find the solution, not just as individuals, but as a team. If they were to prove themselves worthy, they would need to embrace their humanity, their flaws, and their strengths. The Synax code had already begun to test them in ways they couldn't yet understand. But Asha was determined. She would not let her crew fail, not when so much was at stake. The glowing symbols on the walls shimmered, pulsating with energy. Each symbol seemed to change before their eyes, shifting into new patterns and forms. The puzzle was alive, a challenge that tested not only their intelligence but their hearts and minds. Asha could feel the weight of the trial bearing down on her. The syntax code had begun, and it was clear that this would be no ordinary puzzle. "We need to figure this out together," Asha said, her voice steady. She turned to her crew. "Look for patterns. Work as one." Klein stepped forward, his eyes scanning the shifting symbols. The puzzle was no longer just a series of shapes. It was a living, breathing thing. The symbols didn't stay the same for long. Each time they thought they had figured something out, it changed again, as if the puzzle was testing their patience and their ability to adapt. "This is impossible," Mara muttered, frustration clear in her voice. "How are we supposed to solve something like this? It's constantly changing." "Don't give up," Asha replied, glancing at Mara with determination. "This isn't just about solving the puzzle. It's about understanding it. The syntax want us to prove that we can think beyond the obvious." Dr. Yasmin, who had been studying the symbols more carefully, nodded. "These symbols, they seem to represent emotions, ideas, and concepts. Some of them look like they're connected to human history. This may not be just a test of logic. It's a test of understanding." Asha's mind raced. If this was a test of understanding, then they needed to approach it from a different angle. The syntax weren't interested in simple problem solving. They wanted to see if humanity could learn, grow, and adapt in ways that went beyond mere knowledge. "This isn't just about intelligence," Asha said slowly, as the realization hit her. "It's about empathy. It's about seeing the world not just through our eyes, but through the eyes of others." Klein looked at her in confusion. "Empathy? What do you mean?" Asha stepped closer to the puzzle, her eyes narrowing as she studied the symbols. "These symbols are more than just shapes. They represent emotions, concepts like fear, love, hope, and loss. We need to connect them, understand them, as part of the human experience." Mara crossed her arms, deep in thought. "You're saying that the puzzle wants us to relate to these emotions, to understand what they mean to us and to others." "Exactly," Asha replied. "The syntax want to know if we understand what it means to be human, to feel, to grow, to experience all the different sides of life." For a moment, there was silence as the crew pondered Asha's words. The puzzle had stopped shifting for now, as if waiting for them to take the next step. The symbols remained, glowing softly in the dim light. "I think I get it," Klein said slowly. "We need to recognize the emotions and experiences that make us human. Each symbol represents something different. If we focus on the meaning behind each one, we can start connecting the pieces." Asha nodded. "Exactly. Let's break it down." The crew began to work together, each focusing on a different symbol. Asha studied one that seemed to represent strength and resilience. Klein focused on one that symbolized fear, while Mara took on a symbol that looked like it represented hope. Yasmin examined one that appeared to show love and connection. As they worked, the symbols began to change again, but this time, they were able to keep up. They connected the ideas behind each symbol: strength with perseverance, fear with courage, hope with determination, love with unity. The puzzle slowly began to take shape, but it wasn't just about finding the right pattern. It was about understanding the deeper meaning behind each emotion. "The syntax aren't testing our knowledge," Yasmin said softly, her voice filled with realization. "They're testing our hearts." Asha felt a surge of hope. They were getting closer. As the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, the platform beneath their feet hummed with energy. The glowing symbols on the walls faded, leaving behind a single brilliant light in the center of the room. The figure of the syntax guardian reappeared, its form shimmering and glowing with power. The being's eyes were filled with a deep, ancient wisdom, and it studied the crew with a look of approval. "You have passed the first trial. The guardian said, its voice calm yet powerful. You have shown that you understand the essence of humanity. The Synax respect your understanding. But there is more to prove. The second trial awaits. Asha stood tall, feeling the weight of the moment. They had passed the first trial, but she knew that this was only the beginning. The Synax were not easily impressed, and there would be more challenges ahead. But they had shown that they could think beyond the obvious, that they could understand the deeper connections that made them human. Thank you, Asha said, her voice filled with gratitude. We won't disappoint you. The guardian nodded once, its glowing form beginning to fade. The second trial will test your will. Be ready. As the light from the guardian disappeared, the air grew still again. Asha turned to her crew, a sense of accomplishment in her heart. They had succeeded, but they were far from finished. The next trial would be even harder, and they would need to be ready for whatever came next. Let's keep moving, Asha said. We've passed the first trial, but the Synax won't make it easy. We need to be prepared for anything. With a renewed sense of purpose, the crew moved forward. The ruins of Xareth 9 loomed ahead, filled with ancient secrets and challenges. But Asha knew one thing for certain. They were ready. They had already proven that humanity had something worth showing the universe, and whatever the Synax threw at them, they would face it together. The air around the crew had changed. It was no longer thick with tension, but heavy with anticipation. They had passed the first trial, an intellectual test of understanding, and the Synax guardian had congratulated them. But Asha knew that the worst was yet to come. The Synax were not known for their mercy. The second trial would push them in ways they hadn't imagined. As the last echo of the guardian's words faded, the ruins around them began to shift once more. The ground trembled, and the platform beneath their feet slowly began to descend. The walls of the stone structure parted like giant doors, revealing a long passageway. Asha motioned for the crew to follow her. They had no choice but to move forward. I'm not sure what's ahead, but we have to stay strong, Asha said, her voice firm. Stay alert. The second trial might not be what we expect. The crew nodded, each of them silently preparing themselves for what was to come. Klein, who had recovered from his earlier shock, walked beside Asha. He had a grim look on his face, but there was determination in his eyes. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This was unknown, ancient, and powerful. The passageway they entered was narrow, with walls covered in strange markings. The air was thick, as if something was pressing down on them. It felt oppressive, like the very atmosphere was designed to make them feel small. But they pressed on, each step echoing in the silence. After what seemed like hours, the passage opened into a large chamber. In the center of the room was a glowing pedestal, much like the one they had seen earlier. But this time, it was different. Instead of an artifact resting on the pedestal, there was a large glowing orb. It hummed with energy, casting strange shadows on the walls. Is that the second trial? Mara asked, her voice quiet. I think so, Asha replied. It doesn't look dangerous, but we can't be sure. Be careful. As they approached the orb, Asha felt a pull, a strange attraction drawing her toward it. It was as if the orb was calling to her, tempting her to touch it, but she resisted the urge. The Synax had warned them that curiosity came with a price, and she didn't intend to make the same mistake again. Klein stepped forward, his hand hovering over the orb. What do we do now? How do we pass this trial? Asha's eyes flickered to the markings on the walls. Some of them seemed to depict individuals, their faces full of determination and willpower. Others showed figures collapsing under immense pressure. Asha understood immediately. The second trial wasn't about intellect. It was a test of will. They had to face their inner strength and push through whatever the orb would throw at them. Without warning, the orb began to glow brighter, sending out waves of energy that rippled through the chamber. The crew staggered, feeling the force of the energy pressing down on them. It was like an invisible weight, pushing them into the ground. This is it, Asha said, gritting her teeth. Stay strong. We need to fight it. The energy intensified, and Asha felt her knees begin to buckle. She had always prided herself on her strength, but this was different. It was like the very air around her was turning against her, forcing her to surrender. She looked at her crew. They were struggling too. Mara was clutching her chest, her face contorted in pain. Klein's hand was trembling, his body leaning forward as if he were being pulled into the orb's light. We can't let it break us, Asha said through clenched teeth. This is the Synax testing our resolve. We have to keep going. Don't give in. Klein nodded, his face pale but resolute. He took a step forward, fighting against the pressure. I won't give up, he muttered. I've faced worse. We all have. Mara, struggling to stand, straightened her back. We've come this far. I won't let this thing beat me. One by one, each member of the crew found their strength. Yasmin, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. We are human. We face challenges, and we fight. We always fight. As they spoke, the pressure seemed to lessen, just slightly. Asha could feel her legs regain some strength, and slowly the others began to find their footing as well. They weren't just fighting against the orb's energy. They were fighting against doubt, fear, and weakness within themselves. The energy around them pulsed like a heartbeat, and with each pulse, the pressure grew stronger. Asha clenched her fists, determined not to let the trial defeat her. Her thoughts raced back to the crew she commanded. They were more than just colleagues. They were family. And she wouldn't let anything break them. Together, Asha shouted. We do this together. At that moment, a burst of energy shot from the orb, engulfing the room in a blinding light. Asha closed her eyes, but she could still feel the orb's power trying to force its way into her mind. It was testing their willpower, pushing them to the brink of surrender. But they didn't give in. Not this time. When the light finally faded, the chamber was silent once more. The orb's glow dimmed, and the oppressive weight lifted. The crew stood in the center of the room, exhausted but victorious. They had passed the second trial. The Synax Guardian appeared once more, its shimmering form watching them with approval. You have passed the second trial, it said, its voice deep and resonant. You have proven your will to survive, to push through even the most difficult challenges. But there is one more trial to face. The final test. Asha breathed a sigh of relief. They had done it. They had overcome the second trial, but there was no time to relax. The final test awaited them, and she knew it would be the hardest yet. We're ready, Asha said, her voice firm. Let's face the final trial. The Synax Guardian nodded, its form dissolving into the shadows. Then, prepare yourselves. The final trial will test everything you are. As the last words of the Guardian echoed in the chamber, Asha turned to her crew. They were weary, but they had proven their strength. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, and nothing would break them. Asha's heart was pounding as she led the crew through the ancient halls of XRF-9. The air felt heavier now, almost as if the very planet was watching them. They had faced 2 trials and passed each one, but the Synax Guardian had warned them. The final test would be unlike anything they had experienced so far. The passage ahead was dimly lit, and the walls were covered in strange markings, more complex than anything they had seen before. The crew moved cautiously, eyes scanning every corner, every symbol, every shadow. They had learned not to trust appearances in this place. Every moment here felt like a puzzle, a challenge, waiting to be solved. I don't like the feeling in here, Klein said, his voice low. This place is different. Asha nodded. I know. The last trial will test everything we are. We need to stay sharp. They rounded a corner and entered a vast chamber. Unlike the previous rooms, this one was open and vast, stretching far beyond their sight. The air felt cold, and the silence was unnerving. In the center of the chamber was a large, dark pool. It shimmered with an eerie light, but nothing about it seemed natural. The edges of the pool were lined with ancient stones, worn down by time. "This is it," Asha said, her voice barely above a whisper. The final trial. The floor around the pool was smooth and flat, except for one small platform that rose above the surface of the water. On the platform was a pedestal, and resting on the pedestal was a small, glowing orb. It was the same shape as the one they had seen earlier, but this one pulsed with an energy that seemed to draw them in, tugging at their minds. "What do we do now?" Mara asked, her voice tense. "Do we take the orb?" Asha took a deep breath and stepped forward. The last 2 trials had taught them that nothing here was simple. They couldn't just take the orb and expect it to be over. There had to be more to it. "I don't know yet," Asha said, her eyes narrowing. "But we need to approach this carefully. The Synax didn't tell us what the final trial would be, and that means it's the most dangerous. We need to be ready for anything." Klein, as usual, stepped up beside her, his expression serious. "We've made it this far. We'll face whatever comes next. Together." The crew moved forward cautiously, stepping closer to the pool. The water was dark, but there was something in its depths, something that seemed to shift and move just out of sight. Asha could feel the pull, but she resisted. They had to be careful. This was the Synax's final test, and they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. As they approached the platform, the water in the pool began to ripple. The surface of the water seemed to change, almost as if it were alive, reacting to their presence. A low hum filled the air, and the glow from the orb grew brighter. Without warning, the water erupted, and a figure emerged from the depths. It was a tall, shadowy form, a silhouette of shifting darkness. The figure stood on the edge of the pool, its form solidifying into something humanoid, but with a strange, otherworldly presence. "You have come far," the figure's voice echoed, deep and resonant. "But the final trial is not one of strength or knowledge. It is a trial of the soul." Asha stepped forward, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" "We've already proven ourselves. We've passed the trials of the mind and will. What more do you want from us?" The figure's eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "You have proven that you can endure. But the Synax value more than mere survival. We value those who can face their greatest fears and conquer them." The words hit Asha like a blow. Her greatest fears. She had spent her life facing danger, pushing through difficult situations, but the fear of failure, the fear of losing her crew, the fear of not being able to protect them, that was something she had never truly faced. The figure continued, "You will face the fears that lie hidden in your hearts. Only then can you prove your worth." The room around them shifted, and the floor beneath their feet seemed to melt away. Suddenly, they were no longer standing in the cold, dark chamber. They were back on Earth, back in their homes, surrounded by everything they had left behind. The familiar faces of loved ones, of friends, of family, appeared around them. Asha's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But the emotions, the longing, the fear, the guilt, felt so real. She saw her younger sister standing in front of her, eyes filled with hope and trust. "You left me," her sister's voice whispered. "You promised you'd always be there." Asha felt her heart tighten in her chest. She had promised she'd always protect her sister, but she hadn't been there. She had left to chase adventure and glory. And now her sister was here, accusing her of abandoning her. "Asha, you abandoned me," the figure said again, its voice twisting, becoming more familiar, more painful. "You left everything behind." "No," Asha whispered, her voice shaking. "This isn't real. This is just a test. I won't fail it." The figure laughed softly. "Are you sure? How can you prove that? What if you fail again?" Asha closed her eyes, steadying her breath. She couldn't let the fear take hold of her. She had faced danger, uncertainty, and even death. But this fear, the fear of failure, the fear of not being enough, was the hardest challenge of all. With a deep breath, Asha turned away from the figure. I am more than my fears. I will not let them control me. The figure began to dissipate, its form fading into the air like smoke. As it vanished, Asha felt the weight on her chest lift. The room shifted back to the chamber, the pool before them calm once more. The orb on the pedestal pulsed with a final brilliant light, and the figure reappeared one last time. You have passed the final trial, it said, its voice softer now, filled with approval. You have faced your fears and overcome them. The Sen-Ax have seen your strength, your will, and your heart. You are worthy. Asha breathed a sigh of relief. They had done it. The trials were over, and they had proven themselves to the Sen-Ax. But as the light from the orb faded and the figure vanished, Asha knew that this was just the beginning. There was still so much to learn, so much to explore. But for now, they had passed the final trial. We did it, Asha said, turning to her crew. Together. The crew nodded, their faces filled with relief and pride. They had come so far. They had faced the trials of the Sen-Ax, and they had proven that humanity had the strength, will, and heart to survive. But Asha knew this was only the first step in their journey. The universe was vast, full of mysteries and challenges, and they would face them all. Together. Asha stood in the chamber, her heart still racing from the final trial. The orb before her was now calm, its once brilliant glow reduced to a soft, steady pulse. The figure of the Sen-Ax guardian had disappeared, leaving only the quiet echoes of its words. The crew was gathered around her, exhausted but victorious. We did it, Mara said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. We really did it. Klein grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. I wasn't sure we'd make it, but here we are. The Sen-Ax can't say we didn't earn their respect. Asha glanced at the crew, her heart swelling with pride. They had all faced their fears, conquered doubts, and fought through the trials. Together. And now, they had earned the approval of the Sen-Ax, one of the most powerful and mysterious species in the galaxy. We've proven ourselves, Asha said, her voice steady. But the trials were only one part of this. The Sen-Ax will guide us now, but we must decide what comes next. This is just the beginning. Klein nodded, his eyes thoughtful. You're right. We've come a long way, but what does the Sen-Ax's approval really mean for us? What's the next step in our journey? Asha didn't have an immediate answer, but she knew they couldn't stay here forever. The trials had been an important test, but they had also been a path toward something greater. The Sen-Ax had shown them a glimpse of their potential, but they had to make their own path from here. Let's not waste this opportunity, Asha said. We've earned their trust. Let's use it to explore the galaxy, to uncover the secrets hidden in the stars. The crew exchanged glances, their eyes lighting up with excitement. They had all dreamed of this, the chance to explore the unknown, to venture beyond the limits of what they had ever imagined. They were no longer just a group of explorers. They were a team that had proven their worth. Together, they could face anything. I'm with you, Captain, Mara said, stepping forward. Let's see what's out there. Let's discover what the Sen-Ax know that we don't. Asha smiled, feeling the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders. She had led them through the trials, but now she had to lead them through the unknown. She couldn't do it alone. She needed her crew. They were the strength she needed. We'll make our way back to the ship, Asha said, her voice confident. We'll plan our next steps there. The Sen-Ax may have more to teach us, but we have to figure out what we want to do with that knowledge. There are whole galaxies to explore, and we just scratched the surface. The crew nodded, their faces determined. They had all seen the enormity of the universe in their travels, but now they saw it in a new light. They had faced trials that most could never even imagine, and they had come out stronger on the other side. They were ready. As they made their way back to the ship, Asha couldn't help but reflect on everything they had been through. The trials had been difficult, yes, but they had been necessary. The Synax had tested their minds, their wills and their hearts, but the greatest test had been learning to trust in themselves, in each other. That was the true victory. When they reached the ship, Asha took her seat at the captain's chair, looking out at the stars. The ship's engines hummed, ready to take them anywhere they wanted to go. They had passed the trials, earned the Synax's respect, and now the future was wide open. "We've got a lot of work to do," Asha said, her eyes focused on the stars ahead. "The universe is waiting, and we're going to find out what it holds." Klein sat beside her, tapping a few commands into the control panel. "Ready when you are, Captain." Mara and the rest of the crew took their places around the room, settling into their roles. Asha could feel the energy of her team, their eagerness to begin the next chapter. They were more than just a crew. They were a family. And together, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. As the ship lifted off, leaving the Synax world behind, Asha felt a sense of freedom she had never known. The trials were over, but their journey was just beginning. There were so many unknowns in the galaxy, so many mysteries waiting to be uncovered. And now, they had the strength to face whatever lay ahead. They flew through space, toward the vast unknown, united in purpose and ready for whatever challenges the universe would throw their way. The stars stretched out before them like a map, endless and full of possibility. The future was theirs to shape, and they would shape it together. "Let's make history," Asha said, a determined smile crossing her face. The crew cheered in response, their voices filled with excitement and anticipation. They had passed the trials of the Synax, but their true adventure was only just beginning.